Well, we've got some news out of spring training, and as 95% of the time, that might be a little hyperbolic, but what's usually the case is when you get news out of spring training, it's not good. And this is not good. The Seattle Mariners announced that George Kirby has right shoulder inflammation. And according to Mariners general manager Justin Hollander and confirmed by Ryan Divish saying that Kirby will begin the season on the injured list. Hollander in his press conference saying very likely. Let's be honest, he's going to begin the season on the injured list. This is not good. It could be worse, but it's not good. And we'll talk about why it could be worse, but let's just talk about why it's bad. It seems pretty obvious, but I'll talk about it anyway. George Kirby is one of the best right-handed pitchers in baseball. Certainly one of the best young pitchers, certainly one of the best command artists already in baseball, but it's a massive loss. Now, you can talk about how George Kirby was inconsistent in 2024. His inconsistent results still put him among the 25 or so best starters in baseball. That's pretty darn good. And we know what he's capable of. When he has his best stuff with the ability and he doesn't get too stubborn and doesn't challenge hitters like crazy, he's as good as it gets. He has a chance to be an upper echelon starter. He's already been an upper echelon starter. And let's just be honest, and it's repeating myself, it's repeating everybody who talks about the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners are relying on their rotation more than any team in baseball. It was certainly the case in 2023. It was beyond certainly the case in 2024. And it's obviously a huge part of their team in 2025. If not, no, there's no sugarcoating it. It is the most important part of this team. It's the only way they're going to be in the postseason is if they get good enough starting pitching, and not good enough. It has to be elite. It has to be one of the very best starting groups in baseball. It probably has to be the very best starting group in baseball in order for it to be a playoff team. And that's both compliment to them and it is an insult to the offense with a little bit of an insult to the bullpen as well. I have some question marks there. We'll talk about it when we get into positional previews later in the month. So, yeah, it's bad news. George Kirby is phenomenal. Now, the good news is that the Seattle Mariners have 4 really good starters ahead of him. You have Logan Gilbert, you have Luis Castillo, you have Bryce Miller, you have Brian Wu. Those 4 are really, really good. Here's the other good news. Hollander came out and said that there is no structural damage. None. This is strictly inflammation that they see in his right shoulder. That's great because structural damage, you're talking about a long-term injury, especially for a shoulder. Shoulders and elbows, if you're talking about structural damage, you're talking about a long-term issue. But there's not even a strain. It's just inflammation. Now, inflammation isn't good. It's obviously not good because otherwise Kirby would be pitching. And it's also worth pointing out that George Kirby told the Seattle Mariners he wants to keep pitching, and Hollander said he lost the argument. This also reminds me to tell a lot of people to shut the heck up who called George Kirby not tough. If you're pitching through shoulder inflammation in the beginning of March and want to keep pitching, you're tough. George Kirby's been nothing but tough. George Kirby made one silly comment, and the only reason it was silly is because I knew how people would react to it, and George Kirby should have known how people would react to it when he said he should have been pulled. And he should have been pulled, but you don't say it out loud. It's one of those things because stupid people can't handle it, and you are stupid if you think George Kirby is not a tough pitcher. I'm sorry. I try to be less inflammatory with my comments. If you think George Kirby isn't tough, you're stupid. You are stupid, and I hope you don't procreate. If you already have, let me know how I can help. Okay, George Kirby is tough, man. George Kirby is really tough and really good. But the good news here is that there is not structural damage. So if you were putting an ETA on it, I would guess that it's pretty similar to the Bryce Wu. I knew I would screw that up. Stupid. Shouldn't have kids. Brian Wu situation where, he missed the start of the season. Now, different issue than what Kirby was going through, but I would imagine a similar timeline. So I would guess that Kirby is back, assuming there is no structural damage, sometime around the start of May. It could bleed longer. It could be a little shorter. could be a little shorter if that inflammation subsides really quick. Hashtag not a doctor and not even kind of a doctor, but I write enough about baseball to know how these things usually go. And shoulder inflammation is usually about a month thing. Sometimes could be a little longer. Sometimes shoulder inflammation builds into something else, but since there was zero structural damage, and I'm going with that comment from Hollander, I would guess around a month. Now, the good slash bad news is the replacement for George Kirby. And this really is whichever side of the Emerson Hancock hype train you're on. I like Emerson Hancock, and I think he's a fine fifth starter. Now, you're going to take a look at the overall numbers last year. You're going to take a look at his Savant page, and you're say, you don't know what you're talking about, Chris Crawford. And there's a good chance that I don't. You know, I'm not the brightest guy in the world, and I've been wrong before. 6 times. 6 times I've been wrong. I still think Emerson Hancock is a lot better than those numbers. If you take away one horrible start in Colorado, Emerson Hancock was pretty solid last year. And I think he has just good enough stuff, good enough command, the ability to throw strikes to be a fine fifth starter. Now, do I want him to be the fifth starter all year? I would need to see much better results than last year. You know, there were a lot of 5 innings of 3-run baseball, which aren't bad starts. It's a 5.40 ERA, which tells you that ERA is what it is. But, you know, it's not ideal, especially when you have an offense that's not guaranteed to give you 3 runs. And let's just be completely honest. You can't rely on 3 runs every time from the Seattle Mariners. You should be able to from a Major League Baseball team. But we saw this offense scuffle to get to 3 runs a lot. A lot. From your fifth starter, you'll take it, though. Now, there's some other options. There's Jonathan Diaz. I can't imagine they would go with him over Emerson Hancock. There's a couple of arms. You know, Logan Evans wasn't great this spring, but when he was pitching in the rotation to begin the year before the disastrous conversion to the bullpen, he showed some decent stuff. Brandon Garcia is somebody that you could take a look at. None of those guys make sense to look at over Hancock, in part because Hancock's on the 40-man roster, and now almost assuredly will be that fifth starter. You could also look at skipping. I don't think they'd be looking to do that. They are very, very health conscious, and they should be, to be clear. But they are protective of these arms. It's one of the reasons why Kirby's beginning the season on the injured list, is because they are so protective of those arms. So you're going to have Emerson Hancock be your fifth starter. I'm okay with it. Obviously I would prefer George Kirby to pitch over Emerson Hancock. What a hot take that is. Make sure this goes viral. But I think Emerson Hancock is good enough to be a fifth starter in Major League Baseball. And, you know, how many starts are you giving Hancock? Some of that depends on how confident you are that Kirby's coming back in a month or so. Because assuming he doesn't go full Chris Flexen, I would imagine that you can get away with those 5 innings of 3-run, 4-run baseball for a month. 5 starts or so. Not sure how long you can go beyond that. Some of that has to do with the offense is improved or some other stuff. For instance, if there's another injury, goodness forbid there's an injury to either Castillo, Wu, Miller, or Gilbert, yeah, then you have to look out externally. Have to. But for now, I feel okay. I feel okay with Emerson Hancock as the fifth starter. It's not the sexiest thing. It's not, everybody takes a look at Emerson Hancock's numbers, and I think they overvalue him or undervalue him. If you take a look at Emerson Hancock's draft status and what kind of prospect he was before 2020, if that's the version you're looking for, I don't think you're ever getting that. Now, Emerson Hancock was one of my favorite college pitchers coming out of that class. Probably would have been the number 1 overall pick in 2020 if the draft would have been held before his junior year. But he's not that same pitcher, at least not in talent. Now, there's been talk about him being better with the secondary pitches, still the same quality control. Command's not quite as good as the control, but generally finds the strike zone and generally is within the margin of error of hitting his spots. But he's not great. He's not great. And this puts added pressure on Miller and Wu. Now, look, they were fantastic last year. But there's no doubt that like one of them is your third starter now. One of them is your third starter. And it's a lot of pressure for guys entering their second full season of Major League Baseball. It's a lot of pressure. They're certainly talented enough and composed enough, I think, to handle it, but it adds some stuff. You'd prefer George Kirby. Maybe in talent, he's not your third starter. Maybe you could argue that George Kirby, in terms of just pure talent, is the fifth best starter, which is absolute compliment to the other four rather than insult to Kirby. Absolute compliment. But you kind of prefer the veteran to be in the middle of that rotation, wouldn't you? I kind of would. So this is a bummer. And it stinks that we won't get to see him probably until the start of May. But it could be worse. It could be a lot worse. What do you do if you're the Seattle Mariners? Do you have faith in Emerson Hancock to be your fifth? Would you be looking to make a trade? Would you be looking to sign? There's a few free agent arms. Jose Quintana, maybe a guy that I would have considered before he signed with Milwaukee a couple of days ago. Are you looking to add a fifth starter? Or are you confident enough that one, George Kirby's going to be back short term, and two, that Emerson Hancock can handle the load until he comes back? Let me know in the comments. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Appreciate the support. Awesome to get 2 videos up in a week. It's been a long time since I've been able to do that. For those who, number one, thank you for all the kind words. It was great. It made me feel a lot better. And number two, I am feeling better. Part of that is because I'm not going to be taking this pill for a few days. That's my own personal choice. It's my birthday on Sunday, and I want to have a decent birthday. So I'm starting the pills back up on Monday. But the good news is that sounds like progress is being made. Not sure it's great progress, but progress nonetheless. And I just really appreciate the support. So yeah, get well soon, George. Emerson Hancock. Your time is now.